Hi everybody. Let's host a FullStack NodeJs and a React app on Render Netlify using GitHub for free. So I recently learned a way to host our stack project using free resources like Render and Netlify. So we are going to host our backend on Render and then frontend on Netlify. So first of all, you have to set up your environment and you need to have these tools, Node.js, npm, and Git. And also you need a code editor like Visual Studio Code, VS Code, and then Express.js. So you can first install Express.js. Before that, you can open your desired code editor, and then we can start. I'll walk you through the steps to create a full-stack to-do list application using Node.js for the backend and React for the frontend, all while hosting them for free using services like Render and Netlify and managing our code with GitHub. Let's begin by setting up our Node.js backend. So first of all, open your IDE and navigate to your desired directory. And then you have to initialize a new Node.js project by running npm init. So I'll create a directory for the backend. Okay, now we can move inside the backend folder. Now we can use npm init-1. Okay. So inside the package.json, you can see the version description and the main file as index.js. Now we can create a file named server.js and add the following code as you can see in the video. Also, it is better to install necessary dependencies like express.js by running npm install express. It is better if you can do this before writing the backend code in the server.js file. Now we are installing express.js dependency. So inside package.json file, you can see Express is installed as a dependency. With our backend setup, let's move on to creating our React frontend. So you need to have a separate frontend folder to set up your React frontend. Now we are creating the frontend app using React. You have to be in the root folder when you're creating the frontend app, not inside the backend folder. So until our front-end app is building, we can just go through the server.js file in our backend folder. So we are using body parse and express, and our port, backend port is 5000. And here we have a let variable called tasks, and here we are using get to get all the tasks, and a post request to add the task. So when we add a task successfully, it will give a 201 status in as a JSON message, task added successfully. And there's a delete request. So we are passing the task and the ID as in the URL, and we are giving a JSON message as task deleted successfully when this request is successful. You have to wait a little while this front-end app is building. It is also installed in the new version. So now here we can move to the front-end folder, cd front-end, and then if you want, you can start the app and see. Now let's move on to the front-end folder and then src folder, then go to your app.js file. And now we can add the front end to fetch tasks, add task, delete task. And we are creating a to-do list. And it should simply display the output when we are going to the URL like this. Localhost, our port, task, and then the index of the task. Okay, so first of all, fetch tasks mean getting the tasks that are already added or viewing the tasks. So you can modify your app.js like this. You can use the code which is in my GitHub repository. So first of all, you can use Postman to check whether get task and adding the task, those URLs are working or not. Okay. So when we are adding a new task, this is my URL, localhost, our port, and tasks. And we have to use post request and then go to body and then input the task in JSON format. First of all, go inside the backend folder and then node server.js to start the backend server. So it's running on port 5000, and then go inside the front-end folder and npm start to start the front-end. Now we can send this request and see. So we are getting a successful message saying the task is added successfully. So if you want to weave the tasks that you have added, you can use get. You can get the tasks that we have already added by using get request. Give the URL. You don't need to put anybody here. You can just use the get URL, get request, and send. And now you should be able to weave it like this. So if you want, you can add another tasks. Okay, that second task has been added successfully. And now we can weave them. We don't need anybody for that. So we have two tasks in our list, buy food and go to the library. So now our backend and frontend servers are working and our APIs are working properly. Now we have to host them separately in Render and Netlify. And also we have to push the code into GitHub. Let's create a new repository. Okay, so we can go inside our root directory in our VS Code for IDE, and we can push that repository from the command line. So you can add the remote origin first. This is the URL for repository in GitHub. So you can go back to the code editor and then go to the root folder. So we can push both front end and back end together. So first of all, you have to initialize the repository using git init command in the root folder because we are going to push both front end and back end folder. Then you can use git add and an asterisk mark to add all the files. But before that, remember, you need to have a gitignore file so that you can ignore all the unnecessary folders such as node modules directory, build artifacts, environment variables if there are any things. So you have to add gitignore file, a command file, or maybe two separate gitignores for the front end and back end. So then you can also reduce the file size when we are pushing these files to the GitHub repository. So after adding using this command, git add and an asterisk mark, then you can add all the files. Then you can add the git remote using your URL that you have created. Then we are creating the master branch and we are pushing it. Before that, we have to commit. So I have used the option from the IDE. We are just entering a commit message here and then click on commit. Then you can use git push set upstream origin master. Then you can go back to your repository and see whether you have pushed all the files correctly. Okay, so we have pushed backend and frontend separately. If you need a README file, you can add all the instructions here in the README file. Now let's move on to the hosting part. So now we have used version control with Git and GitHub. We initialized a Git repository in each of the project directories by using git init and then created a new repository on GitHub. And then we linked the local repositories, frontend and backend repos to the GitHub repository by adding the remote add origin and the repository URL. And then when we are doing more changes, we can add the file, then commit them with a commit message and push them to GitHub. With our code safely stored on GitHub, let's deploy our backend using render. So to deploy your backend on render, first of all, you have to sign up for a render account if you don't have a render account already. Then you can simply connect your GitHub repository to render. So if you need more information, you can read this tutorial. You can visit render and sign up for an account. Then you need to create a new web service. And then new button. So you will get a dashboard like this, and then you have a new button and select web service and build and deploy from Git repository. And then you have to configure the backend service. So you can use your GitHub repository for the existing project and give render access to the repository that you have pushed into now. Then you can simply connect GitHub and the repository that you have selected. Now I have already signed up in render, and now you can see the new plus button in the dashboard. Then you can click it and click on web service. So we are going to deploy our web service by connecting to the GitHub repository. We are building and deploying from that repository. Okay, so these are the previously connected repositories. Now you have to connect your new one. So you can go to configure and give access to all the repositories or only selected repositories. And so I'm selecting my new repository. Sorry, it was mine to do. And save. So you will be redirected to render page. And now you can see we have connected to my to-do new repository. We have given access to connect to the Git repository. Now we can click on connect. So now we are going to deploy a web service for this my to-do application. You can give a name and you can select the branch and the root directory. You can follow the configure build settings here. So you can specify the root directory for your backend. Since if the backend is in the root directory, leave it empty or set it using a dash. In this case, we can use backend because we have a separate backend folder. It should be to do backend. Then you have to check what is the correct build command in your package.json. And then you have to add the build command here properly. And also you can add the start command. So likewise, you can check what is your build and start command in your package.json file. Now you can add the build command. You can see that in package.json file. node.js and build this npmi and start. And then start command. So if you have any API keys, or if it is connected to the MongoDB or the ports, you can include all that in the environment variable configurations. So here we can simply add the port as 5000. We don't need a Mongo URL here. Okay. If you need more, you can use add environment variable to add more, or you can use .ini file and upload it here. And then you can simply click create web service. Also, if you want to add environment file as a secret file, you can add it as this. Now we are going to deploy the backend, so we can click on create web service. Now you can see the logs here. So you can view the generated site and they will give the URL when it is successful. You can check the logs always. When you have deployed successfully, don't worry, you are getting a web page like this. When you click on the URL, cannot get, but that means your backend is deployed successfully. Also, you can replace your local host with your URL, that the backend URL, and then use the rest of the API and you can check it. Now you can check the logs here, uploading the build and running npm start and our build commands. So now the service is live. And when we click on the link, you should get the web page like this. You can test the APIs now by replacing localhost with the URL here. So now we have replaced localhost with the URL, backend deployed URL, and this is our API tasks. And now I have added a new task from Postman. So when we refresh this, we are getting the new task that we have added. Go to the library. If you want to modify the other APIs, delete and view all, you can do that and see. Now we can move on to the front-end deployment. Okay, so we are going to use a free source, same as render for the backend that we have used. Now we are going to use Netlify for the front end. So you can sign up for a Netlify account. You have the URL here in the tutorial. And then, as we did before, we can connect the Git repository. We can go to the dashboard, add new site, and import from an existing project and connect GitHub and give access for your front-end folder. Now you have to add the scripts, start and build scripts as we did before in backend deployment. If there are any environment variables, you can add those as well. And you can enable automatic deployments. So whenever you commit something and push that into the GitHub repository, they will be automatically deployed and your website is updated in the real time. Also, there are other options, manual uploads, without connecting to GitHub, you can do that as well. So you can run the build command locally, npm run build in your frontend directory in VS Code, and then you can simply upload that build folder to Netlify by dragging and dropping it into the Netlify dashboard without connecting the GitHub repository. Or else you can use the deploy button as well. And then you can click the URL to view your app. But this won't update your site real time because we are using the build folder that we have already built from the existing project. But anyway, we'll try the manual deployment because I have already shown you the automatic deployment, and I think you can try it. So let's go through this manual uploading. First, let's go to Netlify site. Okay, now we are in the dashboard of Netlify. So you can see add new site button here. If you want, you can connect the existing project from GitHub from here, or else you can use the manual deployment using your build folder that is in your root project folder. So here you can upload the folder. So first of all, you can go to VS Code and create a build folder. So we should move inside the frontend folder. Now we are using the build command. So it should generate the build folder. Now we can upload that by dragging and dropping it to the Netlify dashboard. Now the build folder is ready, so we can upload it. Okay, so now it's uploading. Now you can see the deployment summary and the log is there. Wait until it is processed and you will get a URL to view your app. And then you can use deploy site button. Then it will build and deploy your front-end application. These are the files that we have uploaded. Now you can click on Open Production Deploy. So this was the simple front-end page that we have added. Now it is deployed. Okay, so you can use my repository and get some idea, and also you can use this tutorial, see the screenshots and the examples, and try to host a FullStack NodeJs and a React app using these free resources like Render and Netlify using GitHub for version control. Also try automatic deployment in the front end, so you don't have to upload the build folder every time you are changing your code. You can use automatic deployments if you connect your GitHub as we did in the backend to the front end folder as well. Okay, so thank you. Bye.